Hey y'all, just wanted to come to you in this video and maybe talk a little bit about how you might create some of the things you may have saw in the case study examples that I shared last week. So it's really cool when you're able to take your kind of your final UI mockup and put it into kind of a real life scenario where the user might imagine themselves leveraging or using, kind of experience that in the palm of their hand if it's a mobile device, or experience looking at your website at a coffee shop, perhaps as they're browsing for an apartment. So this example I shared was around a redesign of the TV Guide app. And I think from a case study, from an online portfolio perspective, just a beautiful example of one of the more thorough and detailed case studies that I've seen in a really long time. I mean, you can see as I go through this, the different things that maybe we're even doing in this course. So defining the problem, understanding what the summary statement might be, jumping into IA mapping or journey mapping, as he calls it, setting up the site structure here. Again, this is very similar to the IA map that y'all had created. Doing some wireframes, the style guide itself, and then finally going into some of the different screens and scenarios of the actual UI. So you'll start to see if you do searches for case studies or for examples of UI, in product mockups or in device mockups. So here, this designer has placed some of his screenshots or the app itself inside of these devices, and so it just creates kind of a nice experience to be able to see how your prototype or your idea might live and breathe inside of its intended space when it's all built and finally done. And so here's just a screenshot of his actual artboards. And so while y'all are working on six screens, I think this is a really good example of the reality of maybe an in-depth product itself, of all these screens examples that we have here. And again, here in this example, you see somebody holding the phone itself with the actual mock-up on it. So I thought it'd be helpful just to maybe talk a little bit about that and just walk through how I typically do it. Again, this is just maybe, thinking about how you might take your presentation over and above just showing a screenshot of what you've done. So there's examples, or there's websites out there that will help create this kind of, or generate them automatically. And so one is freemockup.com. You can go there and browse all their free mockups. You want iMac mockups or iPhone mockups. And it just helps, this is just a great site to go to maybe upload, and it'll generate one for you. Now, with these websites, typically you have to have a subscription, or you have to have some type of account, or you might face have a watermark on your actual final design. Nobody likes to see that. You don't want to have a watermark on something that you've generated. So if you want to pay for it, that's fantastic. But some of these are hit and miss on whether or not you'll actually get the watermark, or if it's a free PSD. If it's a free PSD with no mockup, like it looks maybe, or no watermark, like it looks like maybe this one is. They usually come with instructions on how to generate and put your screen in here. So maybe browse a site like this and find something that might that might work for our apartment finder, our apartment complex website. You can also go to Dribble, and if you just search UI Mockup PSD, usually these are PSDs, you might find a free option here as well for a laptop perspective also. And so you can see whether it's packaging design or watch mockups, there are different ones that are out there. Cup mockup you might be able to use. So generating a mockup is a really, like I said, a nice way to take your work over and above and actually showcase the work in its kind of final example. What I tend to do, and this might be a hack way to do it, is go to Unsplash. And if I go to Unsplash, I just search for MacBook laptop or anything that I'm looking for, and I try to find one that maybe fits kind of the vibe or the atmosphere that I'm looking to portray within my comps, or what I'm doing here. Let me go ahead and maybe showcase how I would walk through this. And again, this is just how I do it. The mockup generators or the PSD mockups are way easier, but this is just a quick way that I've learned over time to do this. So if I find an image that I like, again, it could be any image that kind of gives you the interface itself or the screen itself, and then I leverage other aspects of the Adobe Creative Suite to actually build this mockup. So I'm going to drag this into Photoshop here. Let me find my Photoshop. sorry, the video, the screen, my camera is right in front of that screen. So what I've got here is that I've got this in Photoshop. You can see I've got my background here. It's a part of the background. It's probably locked, so I'm going to unlock that. And let me bring in the photo that I've generated here. So UI Mockup, free mockup here. So I've actually just taken a clipping of my actual final UI at the dimensions of what a MacBook is. So I don't know those off the top of my head. Shame on me, I should know those. But if you just Google search for a MacBook or whatever device you're using to showcase that here, to showcase within your screen, it'll give you some dimensions. And I just cropped my long JPEG that I used to push into InVision. I just cropped that to fit the final size. So what I do is I just drop it in, kind of create into the top left corner here, make sure I'm kind of lined up as closely as possible. And then I just use Photoshop's kind of skew or size and stretch features to be able to kind of mirror this and feel like it's placed inside of this laptop. So I believe if you hit the command key on a MacBook or in the Mac tool, it'll give you kind of the skew feature, so you can actually kind of shape and turn this however you want to. And then I just make them match the corners itself. Now, in an example like this, where perhaps this is a little bit off screen here, I like to kind of just maybe imagine where that might be inside of my off canvas there, and try to mirror that display or what it would look like. And so here you can see this kind of looks like it's the user's actually browsing it or viewing it on their laptop. Now, what I want to do is maybe take it to another level, because it kind of feels like it's just placed on top of that. So what I like to do is maybe just add a little overview or overlay to it to make it feel like it's a part of this scene. So I might find a dark color that's in the background that might cause it to feel like it's a part of the actual image itself, and maybe just mess with the opacity to make it feel like it's actually kind of on screen and being in view here. So that kind of feels good. 45, we'll do 45% to me. Feels a little darker. Maybe they've got their opacity down on their monitor, their display brightness down a little bit, so people don't know what they're looking at. And then I'll just export that and bring it into Adobe XD as I create my actual final presentation there. So let me just browse this here and find my UI Mockup, and I'm going to change this to Mockup for prototype, and we'll export that. And then over here in Adobe XD, all I'll do is I'll drag and drop this in here, and let's see here. Oh, it's not letting me do that. Let's see, why not? Perhaps it's still generating, so let's see here. Prototype, and we'll do JPEG. There we go. So now you can see I've got my mock-up here, and it looks and feels like it's a part of on screen, like somebody's maybe browsing for my apartment complex website here at this coffee shop, perhaps in Chattanooga. And so, what you can do, again, just based on what you want to do or how you might use this inside of your design, I'm just going to maybe create something here that maybe feels a little bit aesthetically pleasing for what I'm trying to do on my final presentation here, and just create a gradient. Again, you're gonna lay this out perhaps differently. Again, it'll depend on how and what you end up laying out your final presentation, your final package. But again, just maybe some helpful tips and tricks to kind of take your design, take your mock-up to the next level. It's always cool to see and experience showcase your work in its final prototype, and so, or final intended space. And so if you're on project number 4, we're going to be working on creating an app. You might want to think about how you could leverage those final mock-ups that you do and kind of put them in the actual intended space, or on an actual iPhone or a phone device, to showcase your work there. in your final package. So again, maybe just a helpful tip or trick here as we wrap up project number 2 on maybe how you might take your mock-up to the next level. Now, I talked about in the overview of this final project that you might have kind of introductory slides to the work that you're doing before you actually show the example. So in this use case, maybe this could serve as my title slide. Perhaps this could serve as my introduction to my prototype. Examples that include an overview of what I've done for the prototypes with maybe my InVision link here as well before I go into showcasing examples of that work. But again, I just thought it'd be helpful to maybe showcase how somebody might generate a mock-up like this. And again, there are free versions that do this. Sometimes that has a watermark, sometimes not. A couple resources like free mockup, and again on Dribble where you can search for UI mockup PSDs and maybe find one that fits your need, that has some instructions on how you can do that, maybe a little easier than what I did. But if you want to go the very manual way of doing it, it's how I learned to do it, kind of old school way to do it, but a really easy way to help take your prototype, take a screen that you've designed or something that you've created and put it in its final intended format, or the way a user would look at it. So hopefully this was helpful. Just wanted to do a quick video on maybe how to do that, and hopefully some of y'all try this, and excited to see this show up in your final prototype perhaps, or your final presentation. So hopefully this was helpful, and I'll look forward to seeing what you submit later this evening. All right, thanks everybody.